Anna, welcome to the podcast. Murray is the co-founder and chief commercial officer of Sixero, a post-quantum security company protecting sensitive data in a world of emerging quantum computers. She is also the founder and CEO of eMedia, a pioneering digital transformation firm that has led the complex projects for Fortune 500 companies, and an award-winning author and speaker on secure systems and the human side of technology. So Anna, the first thing I want to talk about is quantum computing because it's
Yeah.
this esoteric area that, few people can relate to. So, first and foremost, I want to dive into the philosophical aspect of quantum computing before we dive into the practical one. So, I guess I would ask, like, what's your philosophical interpretation of quantum mechanics? How do we Newtonian beings make sense of the quantum realm? Do you believe in wave function collapse? Are you a Copenhagen interpretation kind of person?
Oh gosh, that's a lot. That's a lot of philosophical weightiness. Where quantum computing, I think, enters into my thinking, and I think in thinking of most people, it's not really in the way we might think about how quantum reality affects time and something can, affect something else across, outside of time. I think that what we have been thinking about more recently is its effect on computing. It is going to fundamentally change the classical computer model that we've all been accustomed to. I mean, commercial computers were available in the 1950s. And personal computers came out in roughly the 70s, and they all worked on zeros and ones, zeros and ones, zeros and
Hmm.
ones, right? Now, in quantum, we have something called a qubit, quantum bit.
I've never heard someone
No,
say qubit. I always thought it was qubit.
well, I think it's like GIF and GIF, honestly. It's getting to
Oh,
be
okay. It's
something
one
like
of
that,
those.
right? So, so qubits, and they can be a zero and a one at the same time, a zero or one or anything in between. So that means the power of computing is going to increase by millions upon millions.
Right.
And specifically not in everything. I mean, immediately quantum computing is not particularly going to help AI, for example, but it will help with quantum computers are particularly good at math and chemistry. So
Yeah.
it's going to help a lot in material science and in physics problems. So
And I'll tell you why I dove into the philosophical first. The sister to quantum computing, in the sense of what's going to revolutionize our lives forward, is AI. And it's the same thing of me asking, like, what's your philosophical understanding of consciousness? Is it emergent? Is it fundamental? And I know that seems like very just abstract and intellectual, but it does kind of it does kind of pull us in how we view how, like, the effects it should have on our life. And, maybe it's slightly different here with quantum mechanics, but I think how you view how quantum mechanics should behave might inspire in terms of how it kind of trickles down into its practical applications in the real world.
well, I think again, on that kind of um, philosophical or spiritual level, it's another one of these phenomena that break the mold, where it's sort of mind bendy, right?
Right.
AI is mind bendy. We can't conceptualize what sort of a thinking computer is going to be. And quantum, the operations of it are very mind bendy. Like, how can
Right.
something be a zero and a one at the same time? That's mind bendy. What's interesting about that is when you look in the past, and those of us who've been around the internet technology for a long time, I mean, the internet itself was mind bendy. I
Yeah.
remember, explaining to people, and talking to people about websites, and they were like, "Wait, wait, 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 wait. I mean, the phone is going to connect to the computer, and
Right.
we're all going to talk to each other. Like, what's going to happen to newspapers? What's going to happen to print? All of these were very, very weighty questions 20, 25 years ago, which feels like this, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. The question is, like, why does it seem magical and mind-bendy? Is it because it's fundamentally bizarre, or there's nothing bizarre about it, but it's us who don't understand the world properly, and That is the world. There's nothing magical about it. Quantum mechanics isn't magic. It's literally how the world is. It's a fundamental, the same reason why you drop an apple and it falls to the ground, the same reason why you have quantum tunneling, the same reason why you have wave function collapse, right? And in fact, these philosophical questions that I ask you are not how nature is. It's kind of a bridge between our
Mhm.
inability to understand it and just some way for us to kind of reconcile its actual behavior. And
I think human being. First of all, I think I had a engineer who worked on my team for a long time, and he used to say, sometimes you just got to get used to the idea. You know, whatever it happens to be. And internet, broadband, cell phone. Yeah, I remember people being like, what do I need with a smartphone? My flip phone's good enough.
yeah,
What do I need with a cell phone at all? I have a home phone. I can call people there. So, so there are this, and in terms of complicated things, databases, um, quantum computing, AI, where there's usually understanding happens in layers. I used to teach school, and you learn the way people learn, and that happens in layers. Like you get exposed, and usually first layer is I don't understand that. That's crazy, right? That's
right,
the first layer of learning, which is resistance to this is crazy. I'll never get my head around it.
right.
You know, the ATM card was like that. Why? I'm going to go up to a machine and it's not going to be a teller. How does it know? How, so so you have this resistance, and then you see maybe someone you know doing it, and you think, okay, well they're crazy, but I know them, so they can only be a limited amount of crazy, right?
Right,
And then if you're a late adopter, you're going to realize there are a lot of people around you who are doing it, and that's how learning happens. So
right,
understanding, adapting to new technologies, it doesn't happen right away. It happens in layers.
right.
And I
Well
think
said.
that very small layer a bit, for sure with AI and quantum, I had 3 phone calls today where people, just like I said, were like, quantum, it's a fake. It's not coming. That's
It's coming.
real. It's coming.
It, it's coming. And so well said. Honestly, so well said. So before we get into quantum cryptography, I want to talk about the difference between a classical traditional computer and a
Sure.
quantum computer. Now, I guess the best way I would navigate this conversation is computers exist in binary, a base 2 system. And if you look at us as a biological system, we live on a base 4 system. So think of having these unique patterns of 4 nucleotides, and that creates like your source code would be your DNA, and then you have your proteins that transcribe and your messenger RNA, and then that like once your DNA executes, you get all sorts of results, which is the beauty of life we see around us. Computer is a very similar fashion. It's inspired by, by us, by biology. And we were seeing this interesting and beautiful symbiotic relationship between these two systems, but that is a whole other conversation. So that's what a computer is. You have these zeros and ones, these patterns of nothing and something, and then they output all the craziness, the colors, the movies, and all the amazing stuff you see on a computer. Quantum computer is fundamentally different. Its building blocks are not zeros and ones, they're qubits. And they exist. The thing about quantum mechanics is there's this observation that takes a qubit from being in this superposition state, an infinite probabilistic distribution of states, until you apply the element of consciousness on the system, until you measure the system, and then it collapses to where it's a zero and a one. And to my understanding, why that's such an effective tool is because it makes the process of brute force somewhat less powerful. So the reason why a password is effective is because you have to guess so many different permutations of number combinations and alphanumeric values till you can actually guess that actual password. And with quantum mechanics, you can almost have all these possibilities exist in the superposition state, and the only outcome you're looking for is the one that will collapse and the one that you'll experience. And this is why everyone is kind of fearful, especially in the
Yeah.
crypto world and blockchain world, about how our encryptions, the fortresses that we've built around to hide our secure data, you don't are not inherently secure, as in they're impossible to crack. They're just inconvenient. The
Yeah.
reason why I'm comfortable and I know that my money is safe or my password is safe is not because it's like impossible to break through. It's because I don't believe there's anyone out there that would rather that cares more about my data than 80 years of their life trying to guess my password. That concept disappears with quantum computers. That
Correct.
whole time frame of 80 years, 90 years, 100 years, and 100 trillion years on a supercomputer doesn't exist. So, I guess I would say, do you agree with that explanation?
Oh, for sure. For sure. And, I think I would offer one thing for folks that may have a hard time with this concept of superposition. One of the metaphors that I have heard is of a spinning coin. It's all things at once. The possibilities are all things at once until it lands, and then it's
Mm,
either heads or tails. But while it's spinning, it's heads and tails combined. So just offering that for people who are like, wait a minute, this is superposition, whatever. So I would also add to the narrative that you just gave, which is perfectly accurate. Yes, right now with current computers, we cannot practically succeed in a brute force attack, which is whatever permutations of your email exist in a normal password, login form, and then guessing if you have a 16-character password with numbers of letters and special characters, it would literally take 10,000 years for a classical computer to try all those combinations, right? I mean, so that is why classical computers are no good at brute force. Quantum computers, as you say, will be able to do that. But I want to take a step back because our current data security scheme, the methods by which we protect data, are not working, right?
mm,
Yes, you can't brute force a password. So someone listening might say, yeah, but okay, fine, but 23andMe was still breached, and Experian was still breached, and the Pentagon was still breached, and
yeah.
the health records are still breached. So how do you figure? Well, how do you figure is it has a root cause in something else, which is a legacy problem. And that
Mm,
legacy problem is client server hub and spoke architecture, right? In order to get into the central something and nodes around the perimeter. That's it. That's computing for 75 years. Central something, nodes around the perimeter, client server. And the job of data security is you got to protect the central server. Absolutely. Protect it. Except, oh, wait, you got to make it porous so information flows in and out. And that's a logical absurdity. And everything
right.
works this way. This podcast
Mm,
works this way, Zoom works this way, your email works this way, OneDrive works this way, Dropbox works this way. So it's essentially flawed. And there's two other big flaws with this. One is you got an idiot sitting at the endpoint. I'll be the idiot today. Here, reading me with my phone.
it's social engineering. You don't need to break the
Oh,
code. You need to.
hey, send a
Okay.
send a phishing email. And you're like, stop clicking on a click. No, seriously, not another fishy click. So
Okay.
everybody's doing this. And with AI, it's getting more sophisticated. And finally, you got someone on the inside who's managing the server. And we just go, blah, 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 blah. I can't hear you. I'm going to trust that guy, Microsoft, my IT admin,
Right.
whatever. And there's hundreds of cases of people in an organization exploiting someone's camera, accessing someone's email,
Right.
publishing pictures of starlets on the internet, whatever. So why am I saying that? Because I think quantum is cueing people into, hey, wait a minute. People are going to be able to brute force passwords. But if we adapt to quantum and put in quantum algorithms, which is a solution there, we're going to we're going to go bouncing off the walls to put in quantum algorithms and cryptography, and we're going to end up right back where we are now, which is no data security or very, very little. And so I'm very happy that quantum is waking people up to, well, there's a lot of
Yeah.
issues with quantum and cryptography, but I just want to offer that to you because, you know, quantum algorithms cryptography sounds super fancy. And if we got that, we'll be fine. Er, you, you'll, you'll be finer because we're headed into a worse world where brute force is possible. But you're only going to end up as fine as we are now after a lot of effort.
I have to say, I love everything about what you do. Your style, your communication patterns, the background. It's the scarf, the glasses. You're perfect for your role here on quantum computing. And I absolutely love how you broke it down. And it's like you can have even if like classical computers and encryption systems are perfect and flawless, a system is only as strong as its weakest component.
Correct.
And you don't have to be the guy like in the movies where this guy is hacking into a mainframe and a computer and this and that. You just need to know a little bit of social engineering. You need to know how to pick up
Sure.
the phone, call the lady at the front desk who's poorly trained, and give her the impression that you're this, you work for Sam who came in this morning because every day someone at UPS comes in and asks for a little, oh, the information behind the machine. Can you give me that number, that code? And then you start putting together a plan of attack. And yeah, compromises are almost becoming like normalized. And now I kind of want to segue into why quantum computing is going to be such a beautiful future, but also a really scary one. And this is because all of our encryption systems, when you use a credit card or when you're using the blockchain, which is another cousin of this revolution that's at our doorfront. So I look at it as like there's like a three-pronged revolution knocking at our doorfront. You have AI, you have quantum computing, and you have blockchain.
Yeah.
And I think each one of these individually is going to like greatly supersede something of the industrial revolution. And you have these things working together. And it, you know, up until now, if you go back to like maybe even the 20s when the first ballistic trajectories were used to create the first computer, essentially. And we have this like kind of graph that looks pretty nice. It's linear, it's Moore's law. It says the amount of transistors on an integrated circuit, I think double every 24 months or 18 months, depending on which definition you're looking at. And it's pretty much mapped pretty nicely. And what this did is this gave us predictive power, where we can even like we can look at what we have today and we can make some assumption of what the future might be like. And I think we're leaving that realm, right? These transistors are getting, and this is a great way to put it, but these transistors are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. They're leaving the microscale and we're heading into the nanoscale. And this is where we're leaving the Newtonian realm. We're leaving the realm where we can actually make transistors, and we're heading into the quantum realm, where electrons can't pass through a transistor without the risk of it tunneling into its its neighboring transistor. And what that means is that affects calculations. So this is where you're seeing classical computers reaching this kind of threshold that's not an engineering threshold.
Right.
You can try to do more with what you have, but putting more of those transistors in an integrated circuit is not is a fundamental limitation of nature. And which we should probably talk about quantum tunneling as well, because again, this is one of like the foundations to quantum. It's one of these just fundamental behaviors at a subatomic level, is that you can't know the position and direction of a particle at the same time. So if you're forcing one into a specific box, the other one is going to become a little uncertain. And what that means is electrons that are passing through one transistor pop into another. And then this weird relationship extrapolates outwards where you can actually send data from one place to another, and which is cool, but what's mind blowing is it doesn't cross the space between it.
Right.
So this is quantum computing. It's a fascinating world and it's a beautiful world. But we're again back to the point of the kind of the trifecta here, where we're entering this world now that all of our old encryptions are going to break apart.
Correct.
And okay, we can move to new systems, which is what you're proposing. But here's my concern, right? Gibberish that we thought was garbage for all this time, because when I log into Facebook, my password's being sent over the internet.
Correct.
No one is scared that you can't be a man in the middle and intercept those packets, those data points. You know why? Because those packets are encrypted. They're garbage. They're gibberish. I'll even give them to you. You can't do anything with them because you don't have the cryptographic key. But here's the thing: you have all this garbage that's been thrown away for all these years, and now with a quantum computer, you can take old data and run it through algorithms and literally get out what the actual
Yep.
information that was hidden.
In the clear. In the
So
clear.
before we even talk about quantum cryptography in itself, I want to talk about what was the term? It was called
Harvest
harvest
log
now,
now,
decrypt
decrypt
later.
later. Yeah.
Yes.
So
So I know that's a
I think
long spiel, but if you can
no, no,
take
no.
over from
Also,
there.
thanks for I mean, I'm getting education out of this too. You know a heck of a lot about quantum mechanics and computing. So I think the easiest way to understand, people think about quantum as a coming problem. I just talked about a legacy problem that we've never had data security. And then we talked about, okay, in the future, somebody's going to be able to brute force your password. Okay, but now we're okay, right? We might not have a lot of time to prepare, but we have time to prepare.
Hmm.
Because of what, Michael, what you just said. Because when you see a news item that says, well, a trawler hit an internet line in the South China Sea. That's not a trawler hitting an internet line in the South China Sea. That's the Chinese Navy tapping into an internet line. And as you say, okay, yeah, but that data is encrypted, right? While it's traveling. I mean, we could talk about how it gets decrypted at every hop, at email, whatever. But for the sake of argument, let's say the Chinese Navy vessel is or submarine is like tapping into this internet line. It's sucking out all the data that they can't use now. But they are storing it in huge data centers. We are all AI sucking up all the air in the room in regard to data centers. Yes, there are AI data centers being built. Prior to that, there have been huge data centers being built outside of Beijing, outside of Moscow, in the
That's
Negev Desert,
crazy. That's
in the state
crazy.
of Utah, because all of it, we're doing it, our adversaries are doing it, criminal organizations are doing it, sucking up all this data because the minute and here's the term, cryptographically relevant, quantum computer comes online, in whose ever
Is
hands that may
isn't
be,
the term also
right?
quantum supremacy?
Yes. I mean, and to achieve, here's the thing, to achieve quantum supremacy, which is I broke all your data, I got your password. You know, some of that data is going to age out. Like, who cares about pictures that are 20 years old or whatever? But some of it, your social security number, a lot of people don't change that. Certain financial institutions have gotten really good, others are not so good, blah, 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 right? So the the data that's being collected now, to the extent that it's still relevant, will be crackable because they have it already. So we have
Mm,
a now problem. We don't have a then problem. We have a now
mhm.
problem, which means that people, governments, institutions have got to start to encrypt data in a quantum secure way now. Further point, we're accustomed to we're talking about timelines and Moore's law and the kind of kind of technology timeline we're all accustomed to. We're all accustomed to something else too, which is the the need for broad adoption of a something before there's a wave of new technology. For example, broadband. For years, I remember this. People are like, broadband's coming, broadband's coming, broadband's coming, and you're still on your a dial-up modem, right? And like, and you're like, when is broadband? And so you finally totally give up on broadband, and then it's here because people are working in the background and nobody's patient. Okay, in order for Netflix to succeed as a business model, you needed wide scale adoption of broadband for that to happen. Maybe millions of people, certainly hundreds of thousands. So that's a logistical feat. But once it happened, Blockbuster was out of business. And what I just narrated is true of many, many technologies. In order for you to really want a smartphone and take advantage of the features of the smartphone, your friend's got to have a smartphone. In order for apps to start to make money, there's got to be enough smartphones, right? In
Yeah, it's
order
like an
for
emergent property almost.
right, you've got to have wide scale adoption. Circling back to quantum computing and cryptography, it only takes a handful of quantum computers worldwide to bring down the global financial system. You don't need everybody to have them. You don't need every research institution. You need a quantum computer, very powerful quantum computer, in the hands of a government, an academic institution, an adversary, whatever, and pointed out that harvest now, decrypt later data. And its timeline to do that is, I'm not going to say instantaneous because I don't know how much data has been collected and I'm not going to run the physics on
Right.
that, but it ain't 10,000 years, let me tell you that. I think that when people talk about the quantum future is here
Right.
now.
Right.
And furthermore, nobody knows when that quantum future is really, really going to arrive. I call it Y2K without a date
Mhm.
because seriously, if you were an adversarial government and you were close to having a quantum computer, would you tell anybody? If you were Google and you were close, would
Right.
you tell anybody? No, of course not. We don't know. It's not Y2K. It's not, oh, that's what we're aiming at.
Mm,
That's when we're in trouble. We don't know.
right. And we don't and just to add to what you're saying, the the reason why we're not there yet is not because the science isn't figured out and we don't really know if a quantum computer can really work or not. It's all speculation and theory. we're able to use qubits at a smaller scale. Quantum computers work. The science is perfect. The issue right now is really just an engineering problem. It's just decoherence, dealing with just stabilizing electrons at a 0 Kelvin. Like these are just like engineering problems. So the point I'm trying to make here is that this isn't something that's like, maybe it's possible in the future, maybe it's not. It is 100% coming. The science is here. It's really just an engineering, is doing this at a little bit of a higher scale. And that's really where the whole conversation of quantum supremacy comes into play. Quantum supremacy just says that we'll be able to use a quantum computer to outpace tasks we use with a traditional computer. So really cool stuff. I kind of want to segue now into quantum cryptography. So why explain to me how algorithms work in a way that they're quantum proof. Like how are they structurally different than maybe some open private key encryption or some RSA structure?
So there's a different there's an encapsulated key, there's a private key. It has to do with cryptography and keys. And I have to tell you, like, I'm sort of wondering at this moment if it's useful to your audience to really understand, the
We no,
different.
we don't have to go too much into the science,
Okay.
but yeah,
So,
yeah.
so I guess I would say the easiest way to let's talk about cryptography itself. And
Mhm,
then we'll explain, and I'm also going to bring in a second topic that we haven't talked about that's important, decentralization. So,
mhm,
so we talked about how systems are vulnerable right now because of legacy architecture. So I'm going to say, just stipulate here that our data security would be much more secure if we went to a decentralized architecture. You know,
mhm.
take the central server, throw it out, and go node to node. Well, that seems a little bit like it might have been like Napster did that, and blockchain looks decentralized. If you create that, no, and BitTorrent works this way. So that's not sci-fi either. It's something we would prefer not to do because it's a little bit harder. It's just, I mean, intellectually, it's harder to think of than just we're going to have a big bucket in the middle, and then we're going to take, cups of
Right.
water out of the bucket. That's very simple as opposed to the decentralized sharing. So I wanted to put that in the middle because
Yeah.
for the
But and just to add
conversation,
to what
yeah,
you're saying super quickly, because we're on the topic of decentralization, what people need to realize is we're heading into a decentralized world, right? The concept behind blockchain is revolutionary, completely revolutionary. It takes out the middleman. It's integrity. It's a public ledger. It's beautiful. It's elegant, but it's a double-edged sword. You're trading off. And where there are benefits to having central authorities. When someone's doing fraud on your credit card, you have a place to go to for recourse, right? Security is the most important thing. We've always known that for 10, 20 years. But it's becoming unprecedentedly more important because as we move to decentralized structures, there is no recourse. If someone hacks into your Bitcoin wallet, you're done. There's nowhere to go. And this is the trade off of moving decentralized. So, to add to what you're saying, Anna, it's like security and quantum cryptography is not like something we should do. It is for 2 degrees of freedom deep, it is the most important next step. And if we're not worrying about today, we're going to be in big, big trouble.
for sure. And you're right. I mean, listen, in a decentralized system, and we could talk about the layers of this and whether or not, in a B2B system like we're developing, it's a wall garden, and you probably do have where you can have a setting. There's all of these different levels of privacy. You can have a privacy absolutist, which is the way blockchain works, where you lose your key, that's it, you're done. The only one who has your key is you. If you lose the device in which the key is stored, you're done, right? And that's a security trade-off because you're the only one with the key, but there's no backup, right? And so, but the other extreme is where we are now, which is I want someone to call. I want Kevin in IT to be able to get at everything all the time. But I would say the level of data insecurity we have now is unsustainable. We're in a horrible situation where literally anyone you talk to says, I know all my data is out there, right? Everybody says that. And they're like, well, what are you going to do? Well, that's like cigarettes and smoking in 1979. Well, what are you going to do? You walk into, I might as well smoke because I walk into a restaurant and everyone's smoking. Or I'm in the car and dad's smoking and I'm not wearing my seatbelt because, we are going to look back on the data security we had between, I don't know, pick a year, 2000 and 2026, say. And we're going to say, how do we ever live with that? The company that powers most healthcare portals, you go to New York Langone or whatever, and you log into your healthcare portal and all your test results are there. That's a portal. And it's powered by a company called Epic, right? They were breached. So, I mean, nothing is safe, right? So when we talk about the trade-offs, and you might not have as convenient a way to call customer service if you're locked out of a something, I would argue that, I mean, it's better than, them walking around in the world we're walking around and when we basically given up the fight and we spend $1 trillion a year on it. So, now to remember your question.
Yeah, there's so much going on here.
Yeah,
I forgive you.
quantum cryptography, decentralization. So here's for your listeners, here's how cryptography works. Michael, you own the best chocolate chip cookie shop in Miami, right? It's a terrific shop. You've got cookies. There's lines stretched out the door for your cookies. And your cookies are on the counter because it's a store, right? And they belong to you. And because you haven't purchased them yet, no one's purchased them. And when somebody walks in and purchases them, they hand you the money and you hand them the cookie. Loosely speaking, that's an exchange of keys. You have given someone the key to that cookie. Now, a kid comes in after the school next door is let out and grabs the cookie and eats it. Okay, bad. I bought the cookie, he's eating it. If the cookie is encrypted in a peer-to-peer method, the kid eats that cookie and it turns to ashes. So it's like, take the cookie. But here's a shop, you have a whole counter full of cookies. If you have peer-to-peer encryption, which means it belongs to me, like a server, or to extend this metaphor perhaps ridiculously, a server is a big chocolate chip cookie shop. And if you can get in, you could eat all the cookies. If you have peer-to-peer encryption that is quantum secure, the only people who can eat that cookie, regardless of how exposed they may seem, are the people authorized to get the cookie.
Right. So like if anyone listening on the phone call on a quantum encryption, the phone call automatically dies.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So it's not like, and that's not this system that's built on top of axiomatic structures. That is a fundamental principle of nature, which is such an important distinction you need to make. The phone call gets killed not because we've programmed it to die, it's because nature is going to kill it, which is like a really interesting distinction.
You've fundamentally broken the rules of that phone call. So the phone call evaporates, turns to ashes in the chocolate cookie metaphor.
Right.
And, quantum encryption, while it's fun to talk about, and there's all these different schemes of quantum encryption, effectively it's just math, right? There's a more complicated key exchange, et cetera. But what we're doing is we're applying a post-quantum algorithm, or, people say quantum proof, probably quantum resilient is more accurate because we're not living in that world yet. But here's the thing about cryptography and quantum. So, and the coming mess. So we've talked about the fact that if we don't change centralized client-server architecture, we're doomed, right? We'll be quantum secure, which is exactly as secure as we are now, but which is not very secure. However, if you say Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Dropbox all institute post-quantum algorithms, really? Microsoft, like, secretly, okay, one day, are we actually saying that one day I'm going to wake up and Microsoft, as it does, where it's like, did you want to know the new feature or whatever, going to pop up with a Mr. Paperclip or whatever, and it's going to say, click here and you'll be, for this patch, and you'll be quantum secure. Okay, well, as you know, I'm sure, Michael, as people may know, it's got to be quantum secure end to end. You can't have pieces in the middle that are like classical cryptography. And people are already starting to talk about hybrid quantum cryptography, which is a fake. That's like being a little pregnant, right? So 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 the quantum future, where we're saying okay, so quantum algorithms are just math. Everyone can harden their pipes. But you're saying Microsoft is a vast organization with probably tons of people running legacy stuff and tons of other people who don't click upgrade, and they got to map it all out. I mean, I've run big software projects my entire life. Like, that is more than you can get your head around. And so 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 it's just going to work. Okay, if I press the I believe button on that, click I believe, we get another problem, which is that the internet doesn't have a boss. Right? There's no Bill Gates that runs the internet. That lockbox in your browser, which is a classical cryptographic secure mechanism, that thing, that's built on layers and layers and layers of protocols. So the lockbox in your browser is we call it the lockbox. How do you know your HTTPS lockbox? How do we know it's secure? Because it's got that. I can point to it there, right? Okay, great. Well, that thing is actually called TLS, Transport Layer Security. And it's built on layers and layers of protocols. And if you just think about, those things have to be agreed upon and implemented by a body that's like the United Nations.
Hmm.
You're going to be pretty close to the actual situation. So you don't get to just like roll out a patch. Even if you say, click, I believe Microsoft is going to roll out a patch and patch all quantum,
You need
right?
protocols in place for us to
You
know
need
how to
protocols in
communicate.
place. And the last time we did there was a major security update on that little lockbox, TLS 1.2 to TLS 1.3, took 10 years.
Right.
So stuff's going to break, and it's going to stay broke for a good long time. Because the minute you hit the internet, if you stay in your Microsoft walled garden, you're probably fine. But the minute you hit the internet, and if we don't have a quantum encryption solution, your data is in the clear.
So Anna, are you saying that even if someone comes to Anna and says, "Hey, I need your services. I need to start getting quantum proof in my company," I still have to have a bigger concern that the internet itself, the protocols and standards aren't in place for quantum cryptography. So then should I still use Anna to make my company quantum encrypted and quantum safe?
So what we do is not going into companies as a service company and help harden the pipes, but there are plenty of people doing that. Like, there's going to be consultants all over the place, just like there was in Y2K, saying, how do I make my bank, my blockchain, my Bitcoin wallet, how do I make it quantum secure? And all of the regulated industries are going to be required to do that within 3 to 5 years. So that's going to happen, and it must happen. I'm not saying it's a bad idea for that to happen. I'm just saying that if people say, "Oh, it's easy," no. But what people aren't thinking about is that it's going to be asymmetrical and messy, even that rollout, and pretty much no one is talking about protocols in the internet. So where I come in and my company Sixero comes in is, it's a utility. It's like
Mm.
Dropbox, an information. If you think of it as, my co-founders get mad at me when I call it this, but I call it a VVPN. A VVPN. It rides over top of everything else. So think of it like Dropbox or WeTransfer. I send Michael a file. It's sent post-quantum, it's decentralized, and it rides over the top of everything else.
Right. And you're using a traditional computer, just so everyone understands. You're
Your
not using a
traditional
quantum
computer.
computer. You're
No.
just your structures are quantum safe.
Yes. It's a bridge over troubled waters, if you will.
Mm.
Right?
Mm.
So it has peer-to-peer encryption, and the keys exist on your device and on my device, access through multi-factor authentication. I
Mm.
send you a file. There's a key exchange, a handshake. And it's through something, sorry, what am I about to say, called zero knowledge proof, where
Yeah.
I don't reveal, yeah, right. I don't reveal who I am to you. You don't know, but there's a way of determining that I am who I say I am. We establish that connection. The data travels from over this secure VVPN, and the only time it is unencrypted is when it's live and I'm looking at the Word document on my screen. That is the
And
only kind of
by
unencrypted.
the way, that's like super cool. And yeah, you're using so many different technologies. It's not just quantum computing. Even I'm sure you're leveraging blockchain, and then you said zero proof knowledge.
Yeah.
That's a whole other ecosystem as well. And so Anna, tell me, okay, I know like okay, a big company would want to use your services when they're transmitting highly sensitive data, but I'm curious of some like less conventional use cases for your kind of service. Maybe like archiving someone's last wishes that it's only viewable. I don't know, like are there any like unexpected use cases for your kind of services?
So absolutely. For one thing, so there's more businessy ones. I'll get into them in a minute, but I have been approached by a person who runs a company that measures the impact of humanitarian efforts in strange and remote parts of the world, including hostile parts of the world. So let's say, I'm making this up. Let's say the Gates Melinda Gates Foundation deploys a lot of money in, Sudan to help with a particular health issue, right? Or in Djibouti or Darfur, all of the any of these kind of places where there is a government that is an authoritarian government and when the population could be at risk. Okay, so this woman goes into these countries to collect data. These are some countries where just by talking to an American foundation, this maybe can be thought of as critical to the government because they're deploying the money here, and that shows that the government isn't doing its job. Like, we don't like it. We don't like it. So this farmer, let's say, who's saying whether or not his water is clear or his crops are growing better or whatever, is talking to this person who's collecting data. And that's a problem, right?
Mhm.
Because from an ethical standpoint, she knows that her data is exploitable and her team's data is exploitable. You can't secure it unless your computer is air gapped. So we have another nonprofit that works on labor rights in places like Myanmar. Big problem. They don't have a solution, or they don't have a bulletproof solution. Business people who travel to China trying to do business, but they don't want their IP exploited. You cannot use the internet in China, right? It's the government. It's in the clear. So these are what I think are the interesting use cases, as well as a high net worth individual whose people are going through her trash because she's a target of a lot of people's interest. So how does she send a flippant email?
Mhm.
Oh, so those are what I think the interesting use cases are. Some other ones are around, it's up to, the L1s in blockchain to solve cryptography in the blockchain, right? But there's a lot of stuff that people don't talk about around the blockchain, like know your customer data, anti-money laundering data. All of these are vulnerability points to get to other stuff, including wallets. I mean, Coinbase was hacked. And it's not because blockchain is hackable. It's because a crypto wallet is a piece of software
Mm.
that is hackable.
So for the longest time, there was a disproportionate amount of males in STEM related fields. And I've spoken to two post cryptography experts on this show, and both were female. Can you help me understand this result? Because it's a beautiful thing to see. And I wonder why maybe it's a pure coincidence, and correct me if you think I am, but I'm wondering why I'm seeing just coincidentally more women dealing with the quantum cryptography than.
Well, so it's interesting. You really made me think there, Michael, because I thought you totally surprised me with that. That phenomenon you said it was women cryptographers on your show. I do know that in the cybersecurity field, there's a low percentage of women, like generally speaking, I'm going to get this wrong, but let's say 30%, right? However, I do know that many, many, many of the certification bodies in cybersecurity specifically have had efforts to increase the number of women. Why? Yes, I mean, I'm sure people have positive motivations. We want equity and all that kind of other stuff, but it's because they can't fill jobs. They cannot fill jobs. So if you've got an underexploited resource, which in this case is women, you would naturally target them to enter the field because you've got a personnel issue, right? So,
Mm.
and this is the kind of stuff that needs training. You have to get into, at a minimum, colleges and maybe even high schools to get people on the path to onboard the level of mathematics and other things that they're going to need. So I do know in that case, there's been in the practitioner space, there has been a drive to get more women into the field because we can't fill high tech jobs. And we're not going to go there right now, but that's part of the reason why we have a lot of uproar about visas and getting talent from overseas because companies are like, I need people. Um, so that is one thing. I will say, I still think it's a relatively rare thing to find a woman executive in tech, and it ain't easy. You know, so I think the number is like 2 to 7% of companies founded by women get funded.
Exactly. I think VC women were severely underfunded. And here's the thing, like, there's also, like, for example, underrepresentation of males in psychology, but that is like by choice, and that's fine. But the thing about science is that I like to say this all the time, but science is sometimes more art than science. And, in order to make a computer faster, we want to pack in those transistors, right? We need to take our understanding of computer science and just drill down on the engineering and pack those transistors closer and closer and closer. But the real steps forward in the field are monumentally innovative, groundbreaking discoveries like quantum computers that completely pushes the needle forward. And that is more of an art than it is
Correct.
the
I
scientific
agree.
discipline. Now, males and females are different. Our brains are structured differently. We process information differently. And you want to have all that diversity in this field if we're going to work as a unit for the human race. So my question to you is, if you have a female in college and who's fascinated by STEM and she's looking around and seeing just like, oh, I don't want to do computer science. I'm going to be like the only girl in a class of 25 guys. It's gotten better over time, but it's still,
Sure.
it's definitely far from 50-50. For someone like yourself, who's secure funding, which is really difficult to do, who's holding this amazing position, who's picture perfect in this podcast, I mean, what kind of advice would you give to someone to take a path similar to yours?
So first of all, full disclosure, I am an English major. To your point about certain levels of science and math being more art than science, I think we may have made it intimidating to young women by giving them a sense that they have to have to succeed as tech executives, they have to have, PhDs in, quantum mathematics. I will say, I will, again, full disclosure, I started an internet company back when there was like five or something. So I got a lot of tech. I was quantitative to begin with and successful in mathematics. And I got basically the best on the job training ever because early on the internet was click display, and then it became all of software. So I got to grow up with that. But here's the thing. In order to run a company, to manage people, to talk to investors, to explain things, you have to have you have to have the communication skills for one. You have to have the intellectual skills and you need the communication skills, right? And you need a high EQ because you need to be able to look in the whites of
Mm,
somebody's eyes, whether it's someone who works on your team or an engineer vendor or a potential investor, and know when they're getting it and when they're not getting it, when to shut up, when to keep forward, when to talk about
mm.
chocolate chip cookies and when not to talk about chocolate. And as you say, women and men are different. And I think in general, because women are socialized to have a higher EQ than men in general, and certainly engineers have never been famous for their high EQ, right?
They're
So
inversely related.
yes, and
The
it's
higher the
well,
IQ, the lower the EQ.
now I find that that's changing. I do really find that that's changing. But to circle back to your question for the young woman, I would say don't get boxed in by assumptions that other people are giving you, right? We have the geek in a hoodie, and that has been our picture. Geek in a hoodie in a basement, that has been our picture of what it looks like to run a technology company for decades, right? So I'm in front of people, I'm giving speeches, I'm talking to young people, I'm mentoring because it really is true that you've got to see it to be it. And people ask me, what did you do about your clothing? How, What did you do about, you could see my clothing and my style. I'm not 6 foot tall. I'm like an intimidating presence. That's kind of fun, right? How does that work? How did that work when the image of the successful Silicon Valley executive is Mark Andreessen? How's that work? It's different. And P.S., there are a lot of people who are being like, I'm not comfortable with that. That, you know what, I think it needs to look like that for me to feel comfortable. Final point to the young women. Like attracts like. So no, you are probably not going to attract a person who has a rigid idea of what a tech executive looks like or should look like. You're probably not going to attract that person, right? Oh, well, to start a company or to fund a company, how many people do you need? 10, 20? So the macros at that level don't matter. Find your path. The investors, investors will be attracted to you like a magnet because they like who you are. I attract a certain kind of investor. The majority of our investors are women, which is interesting. It's a standout we've got like 3 times the number of women investors that you would expect in a tech startup. And we've got 3 founders and 2 of them are women. Well, like attracts like. People, it's not wrong. People are comfortable with who they're comfortable with. Where it becomes problematic, I will say, emphasizing the value of my company, where it becomes problematic is if someone says, she doesn't look like Mark Andreessen or whatever that I would invest in. She doesn't look like, OpenAI founder. It doesn't fit the mold, and I need all the pieces to fit the mold, right? It's like the way we choose books or dogs or partners. Like everything has to align in a way that we're like, oh, yes, I get it. The cover of the book matches the content. I get it. So, but that person who's like, I don't know about that, they may miss an opportunity. And that's where it's problematic because it's human nature to want your doctor to look a certain way if you've grown up with, doctors on television, or your psychologist to look a certain way. Maybe she's more female and she's 67 years of age. Like we have these pictures. That's normal. Like will attract like. And for those people who are considering who they want to work with, who they want to invest with, don't miss an opportunity because you think it needs to look a certain way and sound a certain way and dress a certain way and act a certain way.
Yeah. So Anna, I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better answer. You're, from what I'm taking, is as a female, like attract like. I love how you said that, and you're attracting a lot of female investors, which is super cool. You're clearly different in this space, and I want to ask you a very simple question. If you had to introspect, what would you say your uniqueness factor is? And as in, what separates you from other CEOs or other people operating in this space?
It's horizontal talent. And by that, I mean engineering, mathematically talented, communication talented, EQ talented, flexibility talented. Like I often will do this thing. I don't know if people are listening or looking where I'll put these antennas on top of my head and go, we need to go that way, right? Trust your gut. So there's people who are over analytical, over process analysis is
Right.
great,
It's
except when it's
brilliant.
too much.
Right.
And
It's
to
like you have
be,
like a skill portfolio. So instead of focusing on one area and becoming super, super amazing at it, you've defined yourself by your weakest component by making everything decently strong.
yeah, and you need that. I mean, you need that to run a company. You need that to succeed at run a company. You need that to be an entrepreneur. You need that to, our amazing platform at Sixero. You need to be a big thinker. And then you need to sort of say, okay, because we're working in an entirely novel field. The engineers don't exist for that. So now you
Right.
need to attract engineers who are also like, well, I haven't worked with post-quantum algorithms before, but I guess I'm going to try, right? And that is the spirit of a great tech startup where you're not handed, and everyone's going to tell you no, it's not going to work. That's not going to work. You know, I mean, it's like any endeavor. You have a book that you write. I've written a couple of novels. Nobody's going to publish that. You got to believe in the vision if there is indeed, and in this case, I mean, you've got quantum stocks going to the moon. You've got governments and institutions talking about cryptography breaking all over the place. You've got, all this stuff is happening. Like, kind of crazy to naysay it, but people will. And it's it's tough for a founder not to listen. That's the other quality. Like,
Hmm.
I I I don't listen to the nonsense. I always say if I'd listened to the naysayers in life, I never would accomplish anything. And
Right.
that's also a bit of the art and science, because you have to know your antenna has to go up when you're hearing like, huh, now that's a valid criticism that I need to listen to. Right?
Right.
That's a toughie. I'll say that's a real toughie. That
Yeah,
takes
it's about having a strong sense of identity where other people's opinions aren't necessarily going to demotivate you, but if you have a good sense of self-identity, critique is often absorbed in the proper lens. So
yes,
it shouldn't bring you down, but it should allow you to do the healthy level of introspection. Yeah, and that comes from confidence. That comes from knowing who you
comes from
are, your
confidence.
strengths and your weaknesses.
But there is another, everything's on a continuum, everything's in balance, right? If you push that one too far, you go into recklessness.
Hmm.
So I'm going to damn the torpedoes. I'm moving forward with the thing, right? And often you find that in younger entrepreneurs, where they get out of balance. Not that there's something wrong. None of this is a judgment. It's just it takes a lot of integrated skill, temperament, um, experience, intellectual capacity, all of those things together, high intuition and EQ. Those things are very, very beneficial in any
Hmm.
entrepreneurial effort, especially a tech startup where there's also this constantly changing creative side of things. You got to be down with that. If you're going to be like, oh my gosh, if the thing broke and it changed and now the government says the NIST standard is this or whatever, that's table stakes. You got to be comfortable with that.
Hmm. So when we spoke earlier, we talked about Moore's law and how things are changing. Things used to change in a more predictable fashion. And then I said, hey, this process is fleeting from us. Well, I have a question for you. How does the quantum world look in 5 or 10 years from now?
Well, I actually think it's quite beautiful. Quantum is really good at things that involve large parallel sets of highly fluid data, and where lots of things impact the data. The perfect example is traffic, right? You go, or weather, right? The, we get a weather report for tomorrow. It's completely inaccurate. I guarantee it's completely inaccurate because we're trying to crunch the data, but then the I don't know, some temperature heats up in the Caribbean and that affects something else. And so
Chaotic system,
chaotic.
sensitive to initial system.
We can get an accurate weather report for tomorrow. It's just that we're going to have it next Thursday when it doesn't do us any good. Now, a quantum computer will be able to do that in real time for tomorrow and be very accurate.
Hmm.
That in itself is an incredible achievement. And PS has a relation to our ability to deal with climate change. So knowing the other thing that quantum,
And having AI beyond having like a
yeah,
general intelligence behind a quantum computer sounds just like wild, where it's like it'll pull at the heartstrings of our even understanding of what we're doing here. We're not going to have, it feels like there's going to be no reason to work. Human intelligence is going to be a milestone we're going to blow right through. We're going to be able to not only be able to think a million times faster and smarter, and we'll be able to do a million times more per given fraction of time. And how do you predict how a world like that looks? It's just
you
crazy.
know, well, as I said, there's going to be some beautiful things like the thing I talked about with the weather also has to do with applies to clinical trials. Highly
Yeah.
dynamic system, right? We're going to have better drugs in a month because you're going to be able to
To
talk.
test
It's going to be a
all those like
oh,
permutations for
right,
proteins to get the perfect
right.
pharmaceutical drug in like a split second.
Right. Against all of the different genomes, et cetera.
And
And
the
then
AI would even know like will be the best initial data set. It'll be like the perfect optimized initial
it
data
will
set.
be awesome. And
And in
then
two
and then
seconds,
the quantum computer or the hybrid quantum AI computer, which is another thing that is being discussed right now, is going to barf out the 5 drugs that should go into human clinical trials, right? Like that's what that's going to look like. And it's going to shorten potentially by a decade a new drug that could cure cancer. So that is the beautiful side of things.
we are
The working,
ants making machines for gods, and we're telling everyone not to worry because we have the off
well,
switch. It's
you know,
a little
I
more of a
think,
dystopian view, but I guess.
yeah, no, I, I I'm particularly concerned about um, the potential to lose control over AI
Yeah,
because AI is not a set of computer rules that we control. It's a set of
exactly.
probabilistic, conditions that's based on data that we feed it, and it also,
Right. You
now,
can't open the hood and like you have an outcome. You can't open the hood and say, "Oh, it's coming from there." That no longer exists anymore.
right,
It's like as a programmer, I know if there's like an issue with my like if I'm spitting out a value I don't like, I go through my code and I find the line of code that's flawed and I adjust it. This is a magic box. It's like a black box. So something comes in,
yeah.
something spits out, and that's just how it works.
Now, Michael, I will say, so I tend to be, my co-founder, sometimes teases me that I'm Pollyanna, but I have lived through technological changes before. So while I do understand the seriousness of the potentialities of AI in particular, right, to take over for humans, to take over the world, to be out of control, about, we could scroll back to the dawn of the industrial age and see echoes of those same concerns,
Hmm.
right? And nothing comes, nothing as of yet has come in a vast tsunami, right? Trains took X amount of time to permeate the hinterlands of the United States. Airplane travel started off as internet started off in a smaller way. Cell phones, all of these broadband, all of these things that we were like. I mean, when I think about the level of hysteria that was around in the late 90s about what do you mean, newspapers will go away? What will happen to American journalism? Well, guess what? It happened, right? And it's probably not a great picture. We did lose all local news, all of this stuff, and it's not great, but it happened and we all adjusted to it. We all get up in the morning and we have breakfast, even though you could argue that journalism as a real profession that was getting at whether the truth is
Yeah,
a non
we truly can't undermine or underestimate the tenacity of human life and human
correct.
perseverance. And
So it's not
we
going to
have an
happen all at
amazing
once.
ability to adjust to our environment. And that's
And
essentially where,
what we're doing now, I think we have to really separate the the reaction, the strong emotional reaction to the world is going to look so different from what I am in now, and that's alarming. That
yeah.
has been the case since the Industrial Revolution. Oh
Hmm.
my Lord, a machine is going to do my job. Oh my Lord, we're not,
Yes,
farm
but
equipment's been taken.
listen, I agree with you. You're so right. But here's where it's like the worst case scenario. Think of like the progression of just
Mhm. The
understanding
worst case
basic
scenario is
chemistry.
bad.
Right. So the worst case scenario in the 20s was a lot of TNT being dropped on the wrong places, right? It
Right,
doesn't come at it doesn't pull at the structures of it doesn't have an existential foundational threat.
right,
And
right.
then we kind of picked apart the atom and then there's nuclear fission. And that's where we're like, hey, there's nuclear bombs now. And now it's like that potential now is just like so much greater for things to go wrong. And as we're heading down this path of advancement, we're creating these powerful tools, but again, it's a double-edged sword. The potential to do good is directly related to its potential to do bad. And it's just like for something to run amok and for Murphy's law to kind of play itself out
Mhm.
with the stakes that we're playing with now, it seems it always seems it's just scarier and scarier because
It
the
is.
worst case scenario, it's not this worst. It always it felt horrible back then in industrial revolution, but I think the worst case scenario today is a little worse than
No, it's a
before.
lot worse. And I think you're right to bring up nuclear annihilation. I mean, those of us who are old enough to remember that we were actively thinking in the 80s and 90s about, and there were movies about this, about the planet being nuclear winter, right? That was a
Yeah.
pretty dark scenario. And I think you could argue that AI, the worst case with AI, is a kind of nuclear winter. The
Yeah.
Now we were able to back away from, so far, from nuclear destruction. You know, that's a complicated situation. Not really sure, but I guarantee you, in 1982, nobody thought, everybody was pretty sure. If you said, "Are we going
Wow.
to have a nuclear event by 2026?" Nobody would have said, "Nah." You know,
Right.
back then it was not if, it was when.
Yeah. So
So,
that's
and
it's the famous Sagan and Waltz conversation. Do nuclear weapons make irrational actors behave rationally, or, you know? But
who knows? But I will say that it's a symbol. It's a parallel with AI, and you know, well, I don't think it's. Here's where we are. You can't put the genie back in the bottle.
right.
You're never going to. And you can say to people, look, if I'm wrong by you guys dialing this back or putting in controls regularly, whatever the flavor of help this situation be better. If I'm wrong and it's over, being overcautious, then okay, we didn't progress as far. If you're wrong, everyone's going to die.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
And
there's
I
that
like
book out now, yeah,
no,
called
no.
"If
I mean,
Anyone Feels This, Everyone Dies."
this is like the record of my longest episode, hands down. Like, it was supposed to be 20 minutes, so I feel like I have to let you go, but you're just so enjoyable to talk to. You know, I just want to say one last thing. It's seeing this, how we're like almost creating silicon-based life. I sometimes wonder if like we're passing this abstract, whatever life is, right? We have one specific example on this planet, but the concept of life can take on incredibly abstract forms. And perhaps like we have this almost intrinsic benevolence towards technology where we think like a faster iPhone is a better iPhone. And we're seeing like robots in Boston Dynamics do backflips, and we're almost like confused. We don't know how to pick the right emotional response. Is that cute? Is that really scary? Right? Exactly. We're just talking about like nuclear weapons. Like, when we talk about nuclear weapons, like, it's always a sober conversation for everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
But then we see look at technology, and it's almost like it's a glitch in our evolution where we're like, let's oh, that's better. This A faster iPhone is definitionally a better iPhone, and technology is only going to make our lives better. But we're almost like passing this concept of life from biology to technology. Like, we're so poorly suited for our environment. Like, we have to be on Earth. The temperature has to be perfect. Everything has to be symmetrical.
Yeah,
You put us anywhere else
yeah, we're
in
toast.
this
Yeah.
solar system, our eyes will immediately explode out of our sockets. And even if like we have the technology to go to Alpha Centauri or even Mars, right? Who are the ideal candidates for Mars? They're not the ideal candidates on Earth, like sophisticated, well-trained, highly
No,
intellectual, capable. They're
survivalists.
almost like
Yeah.
loners, people who have
Mhm.
no issues with psychologically being alone. It's not. It's like this meat in our head is like so sensitive, and I wonder if like we're perhaps like as a species, we're like designed collectively to work in unity to pass this concept of life from biology to silicon. And I'll leave you with this like
Well,
super abstract conversation, but it's just a food for thought.
well, you've been very complimentary and supportive of me and the things that I do, and I want to reflect that back to you, because here's the thing: as you were talking about this and about how we have this like pretty much unvarnished positive view of technology as opposed to, say, nuclear weapons or other. Um, I think the media does a lot of that. And I have been very
Hmm.
critical of the media. You have done an excellent job. You are like the exception in the media, because it's the media hype that has made AI into this, just blanket good. And it also has the opposite effect. Bitcoin, that's crazy, right? So Bitcoin really got slammed, or Bitcoin cryptocurrency really got slammed as this sort of, and that's the media. I don't know if you
Hmm.
remember 10 years ago when you could have had 60,000 new Samsung phones come out. The iPhone led the news. When there was a new iPhone, led the news. How do you figure, right? How do you figure? That makes no sense. because
Mm,
it was just a sense of there's a sense of media hype
mm,
around technology. We think things are bigger and better than they are. I mean, look at Google Glass. We were all supposed to be wearing Google Glass right now. That didn't happen. That was our media hype.
that was a horrible failure. Yeah.
Horrible failure. But if you but the media is like, oh well, on to the next, right? So now the
Mm,
coverage of AI, we have to understand if that's where we're
mm.
getting our impression of is this good or bad? It's obviously not either. But you are doing a tremendous
Thank
job
you.
unpacking it and making it consumable for people, these important topics that need to be covered in all of their complexity.
Right. All right, Anna, now I must let you go. How can people get in touch with you?
So you can email me at anna@sixero.com. That's SIX, the numeral three, RO, the three acts like an E, sixero.com. We also have sixero.com website, and I'm on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much for your time and wisdom. It was beyond a pleasure to speak with you.
Michael, right back at you. This was awesome. Great to talk